Hi guys, and welcome back. Now we're going to talk about the ascending tracts of the spinal cord. Now remember that we said previously when we talked about the internal structure of the spinal cord that we have the H-shaped gray matter that divided our white matter into posterior column, lateral column, and anterior column. And we also said that in the white matter, we have the ascending and descending tracts. These are myelinated axons. They give us white appearance. That's why it looks white. However, in the gray matter, we have group of cell bodies. Remember when we explained in the introduction that gray matter means cell bodies or unmyelinated neurons? So here we have cell bodies. We whether have nuclei, the stop of the first order neuron of the ascending tracts, or we have the anterior horn cells, which is the stop of the upper motor neuron in the descending tract, and from here you're gonna get the motor neurons out. All right. So in the white matter, you have one of two. You have ascending tracts or descending tracts. In the gray matter, you whether have in the sensory part here the nuclei, which are the start of the second order neurons, or you have in the motor part here the cell bodies of the lower motor neurons for the motor. Okay, and in the middle we have the autonomic fibers. Yeah, we will talk about the tracts now. Before we explain the pathways, I want you guys to think about them. Like I said previously, I want you to take it as a story, as something interesting and related to your reality and what you have in the environment. Because that way, the neuroanatomy is going to be a lot of way more interesting than the just studying it for the sake of studying it, you know? So you have just think about the ascending tracts are as a journey of explorers. Each one of them is going to give the information to the next until we take this sensation that we are feeling around us to the brain. That's all we need to do. So we have an information coming to us. It's going to stop in the nuclei of the sensations, remember, in the posterior horn. And then we're going to ascend up and give it to the secretary of the brain, which is the thalamus. It's our relay station. Anything goes to the brain needs to stop at the secretary so that the thalamus can decide which area should it go. Thalamus, you guys, when you take it later on, it's a group of nuclei. Each group of them, it's responsible for a specific sensation. So in there, you are going to decide based on where you're gonna relay your information, where in the brain you should go. And when you take the thalamus, you understand the idea of it. But for now, in our ascending tracts, we only need one group of nuclei in thalamus, which is what we call the VPL, the ventral posterolateral nucleus of thalamus. We have ventral nuclei, we have dorsal nuclei, we have medial, we have lateral. But for now, for all the ascending tracts of the spinal cord, the VPL nucleus of thalamus is going to be our final destination in terms of the tracts. And then from there, you are going to project the last order neuron to the cerebral cortex, to the somatosensory area. Okay, let's proceed. So now, about our journey, we have three messengers in the ascending tracts. We have first order neuron, we have second order neuron, and we have third order neuron. However, in the descending tracts, we have upper and upper and lower motor neurons. Okay, remember, the ascending are sensory, the descending are motor. Okay, so we have sensory information from one guy, it's gonna be given to the next guy, and it's gonna be given to the next, and this is the whole story. So I have a sensation, I'm gonna give it to my friend, he's gonna take it to the secretary, and from there I'm gonna give it to the boss. And if I need to do motor, so if this is the tract, and the name tract, we call it in the spinal cord. And if I'm in the brainstem, we call it lemniscus. It's the same thing, but we call it lemniscus. Remember when I told you that in the introduction? In the tegmentum, we have the lemnisci in the core of the brain stem. Remember the introduction, you guys. So if I have a sensation, it's gonna be taken to my brain in three steps: as a tract in the spinal cord, as lemniscus in the brain stem, and then in the posterior limb of the internal capsule, it's gonna be taken to the cortex. Okay, that is gonna be from the thalamus. We don't have a specific name for it. We can just have posterior limb of internal capsule. It's just the third order neuron. Okay. For the descending, we have the upper motor neuron and we have the lower motor neuron. One bringing the information from the brain, and it stops at the anterior horn cells. And the lower motor neuron takes the information to the muscle so that you can contract this muscle or whatever, based on what thing you want to do. Okay, this is the broad idea. Okay, now what do we need to know in order to understand the ascending tracts in a very simple way? You need to know, first of all, what type of sensation we are carrying by that tract. Number two, what is the messenger, the name of the tract in the spinal cord, and the same name of the tract in the brainstem, because you guys, this is the spinal cord. The red thing is the tract. And once you reach the brainstem, we call it lemnisci. Okay, and once you reach here, this is the posterior limb of internal capsule. This is the third order neuron. In another way, first order neuron, second order neuron, third order neuron. So first of all, you need to know the sensation. Is it pain temperature, light touch pressure, proprioception? What kind of sensation is it? What is the name of that tract that is carrying it? And that tract, when it reaches the brainstem, what's the name of it? And then where does it go? All of them, they go to the VPL nucleus of thalamus. All of them, they go through the posterior limb to the somatosensory area. Done. So the last stage here is the same for all of the ascending sensory tracts. All right. And now the last thing you need to know is your bus stop in this information. Of course, what is the name of the nuclei of the in the gray horn? Okay, because at that point you're going to stop, right? You need to stop at what nuclei? You need to know the name of the nuclei. The second stop is going to be in the thalamus, right? If it's for some of them, of course, not all of them. Some of them will stop at the cerebellum. Some of them will stop in the brainstem nuclei, and we're going to talk about that. So what is your second stop? And then the third stop, it's the brain area that is responsible for the sensation, which is the somatosensory area, because we are talking about sensations. Okay, so this is the broad idea. If you have this in your mind, if you understand what every one of the tracts do, so you are all set for any exam question. Now, let's break them down step by step and understand all the tracts, what do they do, and take ourselves into the journey of each one of them and see what happens to them and how do they act in our bodies all the way up until they reach the higher center and we can, thanks God, feel that sensation. First of all, we have something called the spinothalamic tract. So the spinothalamic, from the name, it starts at the spinal cord and it ends at the thalamus, the VBL of thalamus. Perfect. Now, what does that do? If we have the lateral spinothalamic, it's responsible for pain and temperature. If it's the anterior one, it's going to be light touch and pressure. Okay, so the spinothalamic tract, sometimes they used to teach it as one tract. Some books, they will tell you it's lateral and anterior. So the lateral is pain temperature, the anterior is light touch and pressure. When I was a student, it was like lateral and anterior, and I used to say 1P here and 1P there. Pain, I want to keep the pain lateral to my body. I don't want to feel it, and I don't want to feel any temperature. So that's going to be the lateral. And the light touch and pressure are fine. I can have them anterior. Sometimes they tell you it's just a spinothalamic tract and it's responsible for all of them. All right, so it depends on what you're following in your college. You can just have it. Okay, so the spinothalamic tract is for lateral spinothalamic, pain temperature, anterior light touch and pressure. And then we have the posterior white columns. They are important for the conscious proprioception. Now, guys, for the posterior white column, I just want you to know one thing. When we explain the posterior white columns, I will keep on saying proper reception, but it carries also the 2-point discrimination. It can also carry information about the fine touch. Actually, the white columns are very specific. If I have a pen and I'm trying to pinch you at one part of your body and another, and I tell you how many pins are touching your hand, you will tell me I can feel two. Actually, this tract is not the spinothalamic, it's the posterior white columns. If you are moving and let's say you're sitting and I took your hands and I tried to flex your hand and I was asking you what's happening to your hand, you will tell me you are flexing my hand. How did you know? Which tract is it? It's the posterior white column. So proprioception is the most important function because we need proprioception all the time. We need our brain to be aware of every degree of movement happening because we need to adjust the movement in such a way we perfectly execute the function. If I know that this cup is so heavy, I'm going to send motor neurons and I'm going to control that function by extrapyramidal tract to fine tune the movement in such a way that gives me more strength for that heavy cup. How did I know that? It's by the proprioceptive sensation. It's by the development of the muscle tone. I was lifting something heavy, so, and by the thanks to the posterior white columns, by the proprioception, by the amount of the heaviness I can feel in the muscle, my body came to know that there is something heavy. So the information went all the way to my brain, and from the brain, we communicated with the descending tract, with the extrapyramidal tract. It told me, go ahead and give more strength to this cup because it's heavy and you need to know how to hold it. Okay, so proprioception is the most important one, but it's not the only one that is being felt and distinguished by the posterior column. It's going to be also 2-point discrimination. It's going to be the fine touch. What else? I think, yeah, but from now on, I will keep on saying proprioception because proprioception is a very important function. Okay, so what about the spinocerebellar tract then? You guys, the spinocerebellar tract, it is it's spinocerebellar. It means it's bringing information, sensory information from the spinal cord to the cerebellum. What happens there? Think about if you are going downstairs, you guys. When you are going downstairs, you are thinking about the grades and your colleague who annoyed you in the morning, and you're thinking about a lot of stuff. Do you ever think about how many centimeters you need to get down the stairs to get into the following stair? I don't think that you ever think about this. Then how did your body adjust your muscles of the lower limbs in such a way it makes you to meet that stair without you falling? It's by the spinocerebellar tract, you guys. Your body, just once you see the stair one time, you have an information to the brain that will tell you, go ahead and extend this muscle, flex this one, accommodate your body, go here and go there without you even thinking about it. Okay, so the unconscious proprioception that your body is getting based on the muscle function of your lower limbs. Your lower limb is just trying to touch the stair and it's trying to understand how far should I go in the stair. This is the information that is carried by the spinocerebellar tract. You're going downstairs, you're doing a lot of stuff with your hands and your brain and thinking. Your active brain is in a different story, but your spinal cord is very aware of what you're doing. He tells your body how to move perfectly without mistakes by getting cues from the environment, by feeling that this is the length of the stair. So I need to tell my cerebellum to go ahead and control my muscle action in such a way I don't fall on the stairs, and I can meet the next stair without any mistakes. Okay, so this is a proprioceptive sensation. It's an information in the muscle itself and in the joint itself in my body that tells me how should I flex, how much force should be put on the muscle to control it, but without me even thinking about it. That will be carried by the spinocerebellar tracts. And what happens in the cuneo, it's actually part of the spinocerebellar tracts, but it's responsible for the unconscious proprioception above T1. Okay, this is the cuneo-cerebellar tracts. And it starts at the level of the cuneate nucleus. This is a nucleus that is there in the brainstem, in the medulla, and we're going to talk about it in details in the medulla video, inshallah. Now, what about the spinotactile reflex? Now, if you can see a fire, let's say there is a fire suddenly, and then you're turning your eyes and you're turning your body towards that, this is because thanks to the spinotactile tracts. It's responsible for the spinovisual reflex. If you can see something with your eyes, the information comes to your eyes, and then you can see it. So you have it goes all the way to the spinal cord, and then once it goes to the tactile, which is remember you guys, the tectum, we talked about that in the introduction. It's part in the midbrain. Okay, so the information is going to be interpreted there. We're going to talk about that in the midbrain video, that the superior colliculus, we refer to it as tactile. Anything goes to something related to the midbrain, we call it tactile. So this information will be carried to the superior colliculus of the midbrain, which is the superior colliculus. Superior colliculus is responsible for visual reflexes, and inferior colliculus is responsible for auditory reflexes. Inshallah, we're going to talk about that in more details later on. So what happens is the spinotactile, remember that tactile is related to your midbrain, superior colliculus eyes, so spinovisual reflex, that will give you this very, very quick turning of your head and your eyes toward the visual stimuli, okay, the spinotactile reflex. So what about the spino-olivary? It takes the information to the olivary nucleus, inferior olivary nucleus. This is a big tract. They will tell you it gives you cutaneous and proprioceptive information. Spino-olivary tract is not one of the tracts that is extensively studied in neuroanatomy, and no one gives it much importance. And then the spinal reticular tract is when you get the information through the spinal cord, and it stops at the brain stem at what we call the reticular formation. You guys, if this is your spinal cord, okay, everyone knows that we take the information through the spinal cord. We have here brain stem that we have to pass through it to get to the brain, right? In the brain stem, there are a group of nuclei called reticular formation. Reticular means it's something reticulous, it's something like a web, or it's reticular, like meshwork, And because they found them, all the nuclei in the brain stem, they found them all scattered, so they decided to call them reticular formation. It's something that is formed in a reticular appearance, okay? So what happens is these nuclei are very, very, very important in the level of consciousness. You guys, these nuclei are something like group of people who are sitting in the brainstem and telling everything about everything. They are just like rumors, They are telling themselves what happens, who came in, who went out, who reached the boss, and who is the boss getting a message back to him. They are very important because if you don't have this communication between these rumors, it's impossible for you to be a conscious person. If there is this connection between these nuclei, you are unaware of everything happening around you. And it's a very important region in your body as a target for the general anesthetics, because the general anesthetics, when you get it injected, it goes all the way there, and it switches this off so that it can switch you off the world. Okay, so the reticular formation is the group of nuclei in the brainstem that is giving information about everything going up and down between all kinds of sensations around you. And by that, you are aware of everything happening around you, of every sensation getting into your body to your brain, of every motor function you need to get down through the motor and descending tracts back and react to the outside environment. Okay, so the spinal reticular are also tracts that brings information from the spinal cord, and it gets this information to the reticular formation. And reticular information, formation, it has its own ways to collect information from everyone to make sure that it can keep track of everything happening in your body. All right. Okay, so as a summary, so we have the spinotactile tract, we have spinal reticular, we have spinal or livery. What happens is once we receive the sensory information, they cross and then they descend as second order neurons. It depends, of course, on what kind of neuron is it. And if we reach the tactile, it means superior colliculus of midbrain, okay? If we reach the reticular, it means we are reaching reticular formation. If we call it olivary, it goes to the inferior olivary nucleus, and from there, it gives the information to the cerebellum, spino-olivary. Okay, so it gives part of the proprioceptive sensation. Okay, so the olivary nucleus, once you get spino-olivary, it means you are giving information to the cerebellum. And once you reach the cerebellum, you will appreciate more and more about anything that reaches the cerebellum. We don't need to talk about that now, but you will appreciate everything related to the cerebellum as we reach there. Okay, so here you have why do we call it as such. Okay, here we've broken down the names in such a way that you will know what does that mean and where will we stop by these tracts. All right.